Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Julia Taylor, President of the Greater Milwaukee Committee, and on behalf of the Beerline Trail Neighborhood Development Project, welcome to this Zoom event focused on equity, green space, and the Beerline Trail. We're excited to update you on what's happening on the Beerline and learn more about the role of place, especially green spaces in equity. The Beerline Trail Neighborhood Development Project, which began in 2013, includes many collaborating organizations. These partners include Riverworks, the City of Milwaukee, the Greater Milwaukee Committee, MKE LAX, also LISC, the Guiding Lenses Residence Group, and local advisors Rails to Trails Conservancy, WIBIC, and the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. This work is truly a public-private collaboration. The city's support has been crucial to our progress. I want to thank Mayor Tom Barrett, who has supported this project since day one, and key city staff, Sam Lighting, City Planning Manager, and Mike Abston, the Multimodal Transportation Manager. They both serve on our leadership committee, and also DPW Commissioner Jeff Polinsky, who's a very strong advocate for the trail and for racial equity. Former DCD Commissioner Rocky Marcoux believed in our dream and gave significant time and support to the project. And we now look forward to working with our new DCD Commissioner Lafayette Crump. Our thanks as well to County Executive David Crowley and his team, who are vital partners. David, I'm so impressed when you developed the county budget intentionally with a racial equity lens. The state, county, and city support in the future extension of the trail to join the Oak Leaf Trail and bring communities together is crucial to creating equitable access. So I especially want to thank DOT Secretary Craig Thompson for his advocacy in creating the opportunity for equitable access in the rebuilding of I-43 and adding a planned underpass to more easily connect the communities who depend on this trail for recreation, health, and transportation. We're still working out the details, but we thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I'd now like to introduce Darryl Johnson, Executive Director of Riverworks Development Corporation, to share more about the trail. Darryl's led Riverworks for the past 17 years and was awarded the 2020 Frank Kirkpatrick Award from the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. I've been very proud to work with Darryl over the years. He's an exceptional leader. I consider him a true trailblazer in terms of neighborhood economic development. And he's certainly been a true trailblazer in the literal sense with the Beerline Trail Neighborhood Development Project. Darryl?
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad that you're able to join us this morning. The Beerline Trail Neighborhood Project is a multi-collaborative project. What started as a vacant railway is being transformed. The Beerline Railway, once a major connector for companies and economic driver for the area. However, as those companies left, taking with them their jobs, the Beerline Rail was abandoned and a breeding ground for bad and sad things to happen, such as dumping and other illegal activities. However, that is no longer the case. First, we transformed the Beerline into an active trail. And since then, we have worked together to bring artists, developers, community residents, businesses together to reimagine the Beerline Trail and the surrounding area. Just to give you a little history as we wait for the video to come up, Riverworks has been involved in the Beerline Trail development since 2008. It started in the River West neighborhood from Buffum to about Keefe. Then the second phase, which we call the extension, goes from Richards to Capitol. And so this video kind of outlines the progression that we have made over the last 12 years in bringing the trail to life. And these are just some images that we see of the growth of the trail over the past few years. Still having some technical difficulties with the sound, but this is a video that really shows the history and the progression of the trail over the years and how we're able to bring the two communities together between River West and Harambe, get people out on the trail. All the images of the murals that have been developed, the path itself, the engagement of businesses into the development, in the old railway that really traveled through the district that serviced a lot of these businesses and companies. We are so excited that this progression of the trail has really leapfrogged into what we're doing today. And we're involving not only the city of Milwaukee, we're also involving the city of Glendale, Milwaukee County, and all our partners to bring this to fruition. If you have an opportunity to see the video in full, you can go to our website, riverworksmke.org, and get an opportunity to see the full video. Or if you have a chance later before the program is over with, to show the video. But I just want to kind of talk about, we're at an exciting turning point in the work on the Beerline Trail. And I want to expand on a few things that we kind of didn't see in the video, is the Lifeways plan, which gives us a vision of the future where the Beerline will continue to bring people together, people from River West, Harambe, and throughout the city of Milwaukee. You can get a sense from the excitement from the video, so definitely take a look at the video and look at the linear park design by Walter Hood from Walter Hood Studios. It will be part of the excitement, incorporating neighborhood input from residents, businesses into the design. The vision includes space for community events, classes, health and exercise, entrepreneurial activity. Within the plan, we're looking to plant 248 trees, 8 trail markers, 7 activity areas, a bike shed, a greenhouse, and a development of the connected building, which will be located at Richardson Keefe. In addition to the Beerline Neighborhood Development Project, we also developed an equity implementation plan to ensure that the next phase of the trail development serves the community needs. The Beerline Trail Connection are also growing with new extensions in progress and plan, which will connect to the larger network of trails within the Milwaukee County. The plan provides a roadmap that will guide and drive our collective work. Ongoing programming is a big part of the activity on the Beerline Trail. However, due to COVID-19, programming on the trail was a challenge for 2020. We took some of our program events virtual, but we know the trail was utilized by individuals and families as outdoor space became more valued in our community. We look forward to returning to a robust programming on the trail, which in previous years included an annual run walk, a film series, art installations, food truck Fridays, wellness event, entertainment, and live music. As we move to the next stage of development, we are grateful to all our partners who have helped provide expertise and funding. And we ask you to help spread the word about this exciting project. There will be many opportunities to provide support as we plan the next stage of the Beerline Trail. I thank you for your time. Now I will hand the virtual mic back to Julia. And if you have any questions about the trail, please post them in the Q&A, and our panels will do their best to answer them. Julia.
Thank you, Darryl, for sharing the progress happening on the Beerline. You did a great job of narrating the slides there. We've seen over the past year more than ever before the importance of green spaces, including trails and parks. Our speaker, Carol Coletta, is a national thought leader on creative placemaking, and she was one of the very first investors in the trail, back when it was not a trail, it was just kind of an idea in our heads, and always appreciated the belief you had in the work we were doing in that investment. She's currently president and CEO of Memphis River Parks Partnership, a public-private partnership that develops and manages 250 acres of public property along the 5 miles of the Mississippi River in Memphis. I was able to visit her before the pandemic and see her work in Memphis, and she's also doing significant amount of work to open up those parks from a point of equity to the community. And she's done a beautiful job, and I'm sure she'll talk about it. She previously served as senior fellow with the American Cities Practice for the Kresge Foundation, as well as vice president of community and national initiatives for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. She led the startup of Art Place, a unique public-private collaboration to accelerate creative placemaking in communities across the United States. And she's, as we hear from Carol, we're also going to host a panel conversation with Carol, Darryl Johnson, along with our local and state leaders, including Department of Transportation Secretary Craig Thompson, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, and Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett. But first, just on our keynote speaker, I met Carol about 15 years ago when she was leading CEO for cities. And I think that's probably about the time that our Mayor Barrett met her as well. She visited Milwaukee right at the beginning of her tenure there, and she quickly became a friend and still is a trusted advisor and friend. Since then, she's made a national impact in creative placemaking throughout the country. Thank you, Carol, for being here with us today via Zoom. Can't wait till you can be here in person and share your thoughts about how green spaces impact equity.
Thank you, Julia. And it is always a pleasure to be with my friends in Milwaukee. As the mayor knows, I love Milwaukee. It's one of the great secrets in America. And so I can't wait to get there. I was telling the panelists, Mayor, before you joined, that my last planned trip before the pandemic, crushed us all, was to Milwaukee to see my Memphis Grizzlies play your Milwaukee Bucks, and in March. So I didn't get to do that, but I'm coming back to make sure. So as soon as I can, I can't wait to see your team in your new arena. I haven't seen it. So at any rate, I look forward to getting back to Milwaukee. Let me just say the Beerline Trail has got to be the best name for any civic asset, any amenity, anywhere. And if I had an opportunity to build out and build upon a Beerline Trail, I would do it. There's no question that national attention, is forthcoming. So anyway, well done in terms of capitalizing on that brand benefit. Look, these last 6 months have been more challenging to cities than any I remember. We're being asked to reconsider essentially everything we believe about cities, why they are important, how they work, and even whether they will survive. And not one of us really knows how this story is going to turn out, but I'm going to go out on a limb today, and I'm going to tell you that I believe there are 3 sure bets we can all make. One, cities will survive, but I think in surviving and then ultimately thriving, they're going to be called upon to provide a different and a higher quality of life for everyone, including those with financial options about where they live, because of what we're doing today. I'm in Memphis, you're in Milwaukee, and we can now connect. So if people can be anywhere, live anywhere, work from anywhere, they're going to choose the place they want to be. And so I think that sets a higher bar for all city leaders, which the people on this call are. I think the second sure bet is that investing wisely in trails and green space will always pay off. And 3, investing wisely in equity will always also pay off, most especially in cities like yours and mine, cities that have been disadvantaged because of racism in America, and that's the reason cities like ours tend to be dismissed. And I think what's interesting is that calls upon the leaders of, again, your city and mine to be smarter in terms of the investments they make. And here's the good news: investing in the creation and management of trails and green space is a direct investment in quality of life, the kind of quality of life that will be essential to keeping people who have the financial wherewithal to move anywhere. And if we do it right, an investment in trails will also be an investment in equity. And for the past 5 years, I've been digging in deeply into the larger value of civic assets like the Beerline Trail. This inquiry was sparked by what I think has become a groundbreaking initiative called Reimagining the Civic Commons. It was supported by a group of national foundations, including JPB Foundation, Knight Foundation, Kresge, Rockefeller, and the William Penn Foundation. And Reimagining the Civic Commons challenged us to think of civic assets as having purpose beyond the obvious, to lay claim to the reality that assets like parks and trails and libraries and cultural centers and the like can and should increase civic engagement. They should promote environmental sustainability. They should add value to the surrounding neighborhoods, and they should connect people across household income, across race, across age. And I like to think of it as the 4 E's: engagement, environment, economy, and equity. But to do that, to get these assets to perform in new ways is really a heavier lift than I imagined when we birthed this initiative about 5 years ago. And I believe the reason for that, I believe it's a heavier lift than I thought, is because of our failure to believe in the real power of these assets. As a result, too much of our civic realm is under-imagined and under-resourced. It's under-imagined in terms of design and management, scale, brand value to the city and surrounding neighborhoods. And most of all, I think, under-imagined in terms of the impact it can have on the people in the communities the assets serve, and under-resourced in obvious ways. I mean, capital and operating budget, staff, programming, and the time and latitude for their leaders to connect with one another and to act in coordinated ways across assets. So, if this pandemic has shown us anything, it has shown us this: the public realm, particularly our outdoor green assets, have much greater value than we attributed to them last March when this pandemic began. I mean, how many of us haven't walked our parks and trails and streets with new purpose during the pandemic? How many of us haven't discovered the simplest pleasures of just walking our cities? I mean, it's good for our physical health, it's good for our mental health. You can do it alone or with family, and best of all, it's free. Now, in America, we too often fail to value what is free. I think, by the way, the Midwest does, because of its just legacy assets, is more likely to attribute value to free than other parts of the country. I live in the South, and if it's free, it must not be good. If it pays, it must be better. So, but in America overall, we're very good, this, at using money to separate ourselves. Today, we live in neighborhoods that are more economically segregated than they were 60 years ago. Our schools then reflect that segregation, that economic segregation. So, how do you create community with that kind of separation when people rarely see, really spend time in the company of others of different races and incomes and life circumstances? Without that kind of time together, I don't think you can form healthy communities. I heard blues artist Kev Mose say one time, you can't feel them if you can't see them. And we have to provide the means like the Beerline Trail, for people to see each other. If we can see each other, we can feel each other, we can then develop empathy for each other, all of which underpins strong communities, and I would say strong democracies. I mean, do we really need more evidence than the past 2 months have given us that the ability to see ourselves in community with one another, what we have in common, what we're working toward together, including those who, unlike ourselves, that's fundamental to democracy. And I think, again, the last couple of months, if not, the last decade has demonstrated that so vividly. We've learned how easy it is to spread misinformation in our society, easy to have intent misunderstood in social media. It's easier to call someone a jerk, online. I think we have to reassert the value of showing up with each other. And so I would ask, can something like the Beerline Trail be a means of knitting the people of Milwaukee together? I hope so. And that ought to be the aspiration for a project like this one, because the Beerline Trail and assets like it are essential infrastructure for our communities. They're not nice to do. They're not the thing you do after you've invested in everything else. They're really, we have to consider these things as essential infrastructure to strengthen our communities. Now, on another note, some may worry that a great trail will lead to gentrification, pushing people out of their neighborhoods due to rising prices. And this is, let me just say this, just so we're clear. There are many more neighborhoods, many more zip codes in America that are experiencing persistent poverty over 40, 50, 60 years than are neighborhoods that have transitioned from low income to, above that median income. Many, many more. But, and they're still getting poorer, which is a real problem. But, and that fear, which is, yes, in specific cases, yes, that is a concern. And I heard Darryl say that the Beerline Trail is paying a lot of attention to that, and that the county budget is reflecting that. That's great. But we don't want to let this widespread fear of gentrification lead to a movement, as it has in many places, for green space that's just good enough in underinvested neighborhoods. I mean, can you imagine a wealthy neighborhood settling for parks that are just good enough, or trails that are just good enough, or schools that are just good enough? I think that's like telling people in low-income neighborhoods, you're not good enough. You're not good enough for great assets. So I'm rooting for the Beerline Trail, that the people of that delivers something that the people of Milwaukee love, that it's so alluring that it both serves its nearby neighbors and people will travel across town to walk it. Those are the kinds of public spaces we need in America, and we need them more today than ever before. I mean, remember that the Beerline Trail itself will be as equitable as any space in Milwaukee. It's free, it's open to everyone, and if it goes well, one of the public places, it'll be one of the public places in the region where you can find very poor people and wealthier people all sharing the same space. Again, one important lesson we've learned in creating great public space: if you create the right environment, people mostly enjoy being in the company of strangers. Now, creating great public space is not easy. You all know that. The design, maintenance, management of public space must be ambitious, sometimes clever, always resolute. It's amazing, what knuckleheads will do. That's what I like to call them, the knuckleheads. But public space that routinely attracts people across the income spectrum and across demographics feels to me like the gateway drug to shared community, trust, a healthy democracy, and more equitable economies. I wish we could run the experiment on that. I've said this before. Take the next 5 years and operate our public spaces through a mission lens of creating shared community, trust, healthy democracy, and equitable economies. And sign me up for that. I think we need to manage these spaces with more intention around those outcomes. Let me just say, convincing people to live life in public, I think, is one of the greatest services you and I can perform for our cities, because trails in particular are not just places to unwind or recreate. They are that, but they are deeply necessary platforms for equity, connecting people and neighborhoods together. And just like the new $61 million park we're building in Memphis on our riverfront, I think the Beerline Trail's greatest value may be to make a place where people can, as Dr. King said, live in dialogue. And when he said those words at Cornell College in 1962, King was specifically describing the need for places that bring whites and blacks together, white people, black people together, you know, you'd hope that 60 years later, that would be a very quaint idea. But unfortunately, the vivid video from January 6th proves otherwise. I mean, King told his audience at Cornell so long ago, men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And here's the key point. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. Our cities have slipped so easily into separation. We see it in the patterns of poverty and housing and school performance. We know it when we hear which side of town is safe and which side of town is considered unsafe. So as you think about your role in building the Beerline Trail, I hope you'll think of yourselves as alchemists trying to spark that social miracle of coexistence of unlike-minded and unlike-looking people. Because when you believe that that's at the heart of your mission, I think that's where the equity work begins. And in today's very divided, very fraught, very threatened nation, it can indeed feel as daunting to achieve as a miracle. If there's anything that the past 6 months have taught us, it is this: public space and the pursuit of equity are more important than ever. They ought to be joined at the hip. This is the moment for us to make big bets on both, because I believe they're really the most certain bets we can make. So I look forward to the conversation and hearing more about the Beerline Trail.
Thank you, Carol. Especially, I was writing down some of what you were saying about sort of living life together in public and the promotion of the civic commons, which I think makes green space the great place for the connections to happen. We are going to take another try at the video really quickly, and then I will introduce our panel members. Heather, you want to take it away?
Welcome to the Beerline Trail. Our grand vision is for this simple trail to transform into a premier destination spot right here in Milwaukee's historic Harambe neighborhood.
We need investments, large and small, from everyone, including people and organizations like yours. With your support, we can create one of Milwaukee's premier art and culture parks. Beyond the financial investment, we want you to partner with us in the park's development, follow the work, and share in the excitement once it's complete. Join us in making the Beerline Trail Connector Park a reality. The Beerline Trail is the famous rail line site known for carrying Milwaukee's most known staple, beer. By 1990, the Beerline rail line right-of-way was abandoned as industry and transportation in Milwaukee changed. Since 2002, neighborhood residents, together with the city of Milwaukee, removed old railroad tracks and created the first phase of the Beerline Trail from Bremen to Buffalo. The trail now extends to Capitol. Over the last decade, approximately $2.9 million has been invested in the newest extension of the Beerline Trail from Burleigh to Capitol Drive. This investment included land acquisition and trail construction, community improvement projects, planning, engagement in programming, and environmental remediation. It also leveraged real estate development adjacent to the trail. The Beerline Trail runs through Harambe and River West neighborhoods and the Riverworks Creative District as the bridge that connects all three. We saw communities come together to decide what they wanted from the public assets in their space. Teaming up with world-renowned landscape architect and artist Walter Hood of Hood Design Studios and the winner of this year's MacArthur Fellowship, we created a park design rightfully called the Lifeways Plan. The Lifeways Plan design for the Connector Park includes community greenhouses, a large performance stage, play and workout equipment, cafe and community space, green space, and other first-class amenities. This park will be a world-class cultural destination for all. The Beerline is the tie that binds, with a mission to sustain and enrich the lives of neighbors in Harambe and River West. We promote health, well-being, and prosperity in both neighborhoods by sharing resources, voices, ideas, labor, and creativity. The Lifeways Plan, along with the Equitable Implementation Plan, ensures everyone benefits, a direct result of years of visioning, imagination, and planning in collaboration with residents, workers, artists, community organizers, the City of Milwaukee, local and citywide organizations such as Riverworks, Greater Milwaukee Committee, LISC Milwaukee, MKE to LAX, Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and the Rails to Trails Conservancy. Your investment creates employment and small business opportunities in a neighborhood where joblessness rates are higher than in other parts of the city. Your investment helps give a voice and power to those historically locked out of opportunities seen in other parts of our community, such as downtown Milwaukee. Your investment spurs further investment in housing, business development, good schools, and wealth building. And your investment sparks hope.
We'd like to invite you to become an integral part of our community. Be a part of creating the Beerline Connector Park. We can't wait to partner with you. See you soon.
I'm so glad we got a chance to see this because I think being a visual person, it's always good to get a view of what we're working on. And we're very fortunate to have local, regional, and state leaders as partners in our work. Mayor Tom Barrett's been a longtime advocate of the Beerline Trail, and Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, who took office this past spring, is committed to racial equity through the county's initiatives, and a very important partner. And we're very grateful for the advocacy of Secretary Craig Thompson as we work with the Department of Transportation on ensuring the Beerline's connections are a true asset to the people in the Harambe and River West neighborhoods. And I'd also like to welcome Rosalind Wolf, who will moderate the panel. Rosalind is the Community Creative Placemaking and Economic Development Coordinator and serves as Project Director for the Beerline Trail Neighborhood Development Project. She's also more than a project director. She's an advocate. She's a cheerleader for all things Beerline, and she also helped produce the video you just saw. So Rosalind?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Julia. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you to our panelists, Secretary Thompson, County Exec Crowley, Mayor Barrett, and our keynote, Carol Coletta, and my boss, Darryl Johnson. We appreciate you all being here with us. And to our audience, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. We look forward to engaging with you on an in-person basis sometime soon. So before we get started, I just want to let you know that we are taking audience questions at the end of the video of the presentation. So please stay with us, and you can use the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll get to you after we are all finished. So we've heard from Darryl and Carol. Thank you both. We'd like to open up the floor now for our other panelists to give some brief opening remarks, and we will start with Secretary Thompson.
Thank you, Rosalind. And I really want to thank the Greater Milwaukee Committee for the opportunity to be part of this conversation today. You know, when you look at the Beerline Trail, I think it really is an example of community development done right. And I really just want to commend, I am so glad that we did get to see the video as well. But I do want to say, Darryl, that I was on a meeting earlier today where I had technical difficulties, and you handled it much better than I did. So you did a great job of narrating the first time around. But the Beerline Trail really is an example of that. Obviously, the Harambe and River West neighborhoods have been so integrally involved in this and have wanted to make it. It's come from the ground up of how these communities want to see it work, and it's clearly had the leadership of the local leaders there. Mayor Barrett had asked, I don't remember Mayor, but I know it was pre-pandemic. I don't remember the exact month, but he had invited DNR Secretary Preston Cole and myself to come down and actually walk the trail. And that was really valuable for me to do, because anytime that we can, from my standpoint, that we can have right away from an abandoned rail turned into a bike or a facility that can be used by bicyclists or other pedestrians, it's tremendous, but some are more important than others. And I think, getting down there and walking this and seeing what it means, both from the usual active transportation and different things we can do, but with an equity lens on this was really powerful. I know for me, and I know Preston, I think, felt the same way. So when we got to the point of the I-43 project, and Julia Taylor reached out, and the mayor's office reached out, and the county executive's office reached out and asked if we could do this in a way that it doesn't, it doesn't bisect the Beerline Trail, and that we can allow the connectivity, that it doesn't have to go around. I think, me having been down there and walked it firsthand with the folks and seen the amount of sweat equity that everybody's put into this and what it's meant to the area, definitely helped me in my decision making. It's one of those, sometimes you got to get engineers, you got to push them a little bit to think outside of their comfort zone, because from their standpoint, well, what's wrong with having the trail just go around a little bit, around there? But, I think we did recognize it was important not, to make sure this was connected, and that the Beerline Trail could continue uninhibited, underneath I-43. And we think the extra cost involved is definitely a good investment, because it's just such a tremendous project. So, I always like to say that transportation connects us, and this project, this Beerline Trail project, is such a great example of that. And listening to Carol talk about, not being separated and being in public together was a great reminder of that. So I just appreciate the ability to be with you here today and be on this panel, and look forward to the conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. County Executive Crowley.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you to the Greater Milwaukee Committee, as well as the Riverworks Development Corporation. Thank you, Julia, Darryl, and Rosalind, for all that you're doing. And thank you, Carol, for that great keynote, because, with yesterday being Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Day, reminds me that you particularly talked about how the separation happens. And I think that when you think about the Beerline Trail, this is about making connections throughout all of Milwaukee County. And we need to make those connections, particularly right now, because we know that we've seen the mental health in many of us deteriorating because of the pandemic. We see that we have to make sure that we're connecting people from different backgrounds to one another. And this is a prime example of how we can do that while also investing in equity. And I'm excited to be a part of this panel. It's good to see you, Secretary and Mayor. But more importantly, the collaboration that is happening around this, lets you know that we are doing everything that we can to leverage all the resources that we have to make sure that everyone have access to our parks, our Beerline Trail, and many of our beaches, and quite frankly, all of our natural resources here in Milwaukee County.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mayor Barrett.
Well, thank you very much, Rosalind. And it's great to be on this panel. It's great to talk about the trail. It's something I'm very, very excited about. And Secretary Thompson talked about when he came to visit and walk the trail. And I will always remember, because he was so incredibly gracious, where he said, if we needed anything, not to hesitate and to just call Preston Cole, which was a very humorous way of sharing the wealth of the DNR along with the Department of Transportation, because Secretary Thompson and the DOT have been just an amazing partner in this. But as he mentioned, and others have mentioned, this really came from the ground up. And I think the work of Riverworks and the work that Darryl and his team have done, when you look at the issues that are surrounding our community and issues that are present in America right now, equity is at the forefront. And it's making sure that we have an equitable distribution of benefits. And I think one of the most critical components of what we're talking about today is place. And Carol talks about place very eloquently. And there's a lot of discussion about place, but at the end of the day, are you seeing the investments in the neighborhoods where people live, where people need the investments? And to me, that is what's so critical about this, is that you can have all these studies and you can have all the conversations, but show me the money. Are you putting the money in the neighborhoods where people live? And at the top of that list, and we have to be honest about it, is public safety. Are we creating safe places? Are we creating places where people want to take their children? So when we saw the video, what I was looking for, and what I think all of us are looking for, is this a place where I can take my kids? If I can take my kids there, if we can activate public spaces where people feel safe and they can do things that they enjoy, and we all know at some point the pandemic's going to end and we'll all be able to get out there and enjoy life again, we have to invest in these neighborhoods. And so the investments that the DOT is making, the investments the city's making, the leadership of the GMC, the leadership of the GMF, involvement of LISC, of Riverworks is so important. And having the partnership with the county tells you that what we're trying to do is we're trying to create hope in people's lives and give them an opportunity in these very, very stressful times, in these very, very trying times, to go where they can be with their families and they can be safe. And so it's an incredibly simple concept, but the execution of the concept is what's so important. And I think what's made this such an attractive asset, if you will, is it is so unusual. Nobody in a million years would say, well, let's take this old trail and let's make it a park. Let's make a linear park here. Let's draw people into it. And that's exactly what's going on. So to me, it's exciting. But at the end of the day, we have to build a place where people want to come. If we don't do that, then we fail. And so that's where my focus is. How can we make this a place where people want to come on a sunny afternoon in the middle of the summer or in the early fall? And so that's what motivates me so much.
Thank you. It's really great to hear all this excitement that people have around the trail. We're working really hard to make it a great place. So I super appreciate you all being invested. So again, just want to make sure our audience knows that we'll have a Q&A after the presentation. So use the Q&A box and we'll get to your questions. So we can get started. I think my first question is for Secretary Thompson, but you really answered the question in that at its core, transportation is really about connection. And that's what we want the Beerline Trail. It's about connection. And so for you, how do trails, including the Beerline, Rock the Badger, fit into the state's efforts to connect communities?
Thanks, Rosalind. And you know, it really is what it's about. And so many people think about it just as an amenity or as a recreational amenity, which it is. But it means a lot more than that to a lot of communities, and it's an asset. And again, especially when we're talking about areas here that have not seen the type of economic investment that the mayor just talked about, it means a lot more than that, and where it is and being intentional about that. So it does connect rather than divide. This one in particular connects rather than divides. And so, you know, to me, that's what they're supposed to do. And this is about the best example I could think of doing that.
Perfect, thank you. Mayor Barrett, the next question goes to you. So the city has been a partner in the Beerline Trail Neighborhood Development Project. We absolutely love Mike Amsden and Sam Lightning that sit at the table, and now we have Tanya Fonseca back with us. So as the unused rail line has been transformed, we've done all this work and continuing development, why has it been important for the city to invest so much and be at the table?
Well, you talk about partnerships and both within city government. And when I say city government, I'm talking about the Department of City Development. I'm talking about the Department of Public Works. They've been at the table. Sam has made this a personal mission of his to be involved in this, and Jeff Polinsky and his team at the Department of Public Works are incredibly engaged as well. So it starts within city government for us, the partnership. But this partnership from the city perspective would go nowhere if we didn't have the community partners, if we didn't have the corporate partners, if we didn't have individuals who understood that we can bring so much more, because there are so many different components to this. And some of it is what I call the basic blocking and tackling of development, of city government, of getting control of the land, and Brian Monroe and his generosity of getting the help from the state to help us remediate, get the help to build the trails, to actually make the replacement. But we want to do more than that, because housing is part of this. So we want to make sure that we're using all of our tools for housing in the Harambe and River West neighborhood. And so having those partnerships and developing more partnerships, not only with the GMF and the GMC, but with the financial community, so that we can do more housing. So to me, there are so many opportunities here to have more partnerships. And the stronger those partnerships are, the deeper the plant goes and the deeper the roots are. So we have limitations at the city. We obviously have made considerable investments on our own, but the state has really come through, and the federal government has come through, and we need to have that continue. And I'm confident with the current leadership that that's going to continue. So the deeper we can have these roots and have community partners like Riverworks right there, it's so important that they're on the ground. They know the territory. You've got to know the territory, and Riverworks knows the territory.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. So County Executive Crowley, it's weird because I know David. So it's really I'm excited to see you in this position and continuing the fight for us from urban underground now to the county executive. So just a shout out to you from Rosalind personally. So back in August, you outlined your vision for achieving racial equity in the county, which was fantastic. And I read it, so just thank you very much for all your words. So for this, how do green spaces, parks, and trails, such as the Beerline Trail, fit into that vision of creating racial equity?
Well, I think it's an excellent question. And for those who don't know, our vision and mission here in Milwaukee County is that we can become the healthiest community in the state of Wisconsin by achieving racial equity. But in order for us to really do that, we really have to shift our focus on strategies that start upstream and really invest in equity by focusing on our resources on communities throughout this whole county that have been historically underserved, and hopefully we can increase their opportunities. When you think about our parks and our green spaces, they fit directly into that vision, because I truly believe that no matter where you live in Milwaukee County, you should have the opportunity to enjoy all of our parks, all of our green spaces. We have beaches, we have golf courses. I mean, all of our natural resources that Milwaukee County has to offer. And we are on this trail of reach and equity. When you look at what we recently did at Bradford Beach last year, it is now the most accessible beach in America, thanks to some of the upgrades that we made to the ramps. And now we have beach accessible wheelchairs. And these upgrades allow everyone to feel like they're wanted and accepted at Bradford Beach. But our trails like Beerline, they're all about connection. And in the heart of the city of Milwaukee, you can enjoy this trail, natural views and the skyline. And on that same trail, you can get connected to all these other trails. I mean, we have over 100 miles when you think about our Oak Leaf Trail as well throughout the city and the county. And so it's important that no matter where you live, you should be able to access these types of resources and feel connected. And we're doing everything that we can in our parks. But again, just make sure that we're staying on this trail of achieving racial equity. We're also, going to the community and looking at what we need to do within our parks to make sure that it's reflective of that community. And that goes with the renaming of one of the parks last year, which is now called Indigenous Peoples Park. And just last week or 2 weeks ago, we renamed Wall Park the Harriet Tubman Park. And so these are some of the things that we're doing right now, and it fits right directly into Milwaukee County's vision.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I saw that on Facebook. I was like, oh, snaps. I love it. So thank you for that. My next question goes to Darryl Johnson. I think I know him, not quite sure. We have the same backgrounds. So Darryl, not to age you, but you grew up in Harambe. So you remember playing on the train track when actual trains were going through as a kid. And so you saw the area active with this industry. Can you just, just take us back, way back into time and describe how that was that time for you?
Thank you, Rosalind. Great job with the video and all your work that you do on the Beerline Trail. I just want to give you praise and thank you. For me, as a kid, if we think about it, we think about maybe a little bit more than half a decade that I've been living, working, and also worshiping in this community. And right now, I grew up about 6 blocks from where I work now. We were probably one of a few Black families that moved into this area, like I said, over half a century ago. And this neighborhood became home for a lot of my family. So for me, this has been a labor of love to really help transform the Harambe area, but also connect the River West neighborhood to all the things that we are doing. So for me, we used to travel back and forth. As a kid, I loved swimming. So we used to go to Gordon Park in the morning and go swimming. Then in the evening, we would go to Lincoln Park. So for us, the easiest way to get back and forth was the Beerline. So we would pack our lunch or, buy lunch at the swim pools and buy dinner, either on the way home or at the pool at Lincoln Park. So it became very convenient for us to get back and forth. And those days that we got lazy, and if there was a train coming and we felt safe, we'll make it a lot easier. We'll just hop on back of the train to get back home. But it was an easy pass for us to get back and forth. But some of the things that really has happened over the years, within the 1960s, we saw the riots happen a little bit on the northeast side. We saw the white flight out of the neighborhood, because we used to always talk about we didn't need to go downtown because we had everything right here in the neighborhood. We had our pharmacies, we had our grocery store, we had our clothing stores, right there on 3rd Street now, which is King Drive. So it was a very convenient neighborhood for us. And my brother worked at one of the businesses, U.S. Corrugated, which is right along the Beerline Trail now. So for us, this has been a neighborhood where my family and I still, really love to live, because it has so much of the advantages, being close to downtown, being close to Glendale, being close to Sherwood. But there's a lot of opportunities for this community itself to be prosperous.
Thank you. I couldn't imagine seeing that transformation from where you started to where it's now going. So thank you for that perspective, Darryl. So Carol, thank you so much for your keynote. I wrote down a few notes, and I really liked your, really loved just the green space allowing us to live in dialogue. And that stood out to me. So living in dialogue, I'm going to use that from now on. So can you just tell us, you've done a lot of work in Memphis. Were there any unexpected or anticipated positive results from the trail development at the river?
Were there any, I'm sorry, Rosalind, would you say any positive results unexpected from our riverfront work?
Yep.
I could talk about it in lots of terms, but I think, and this will sound so fundamental, but I believe the ability to get beyond what people see on the news and to see, whole families enjoying themselves together in very normal, natural ways. I know that sounds ridiculous and it sounds so simple, but it makes me remember how our image of the other is formed. And I was struck, Secretary Thompson, when you said, I walked it firsthand, and it made me see something different. Walked it firsthand. I could see that it was authentic and done from the ground up, tribute to the great work that Darryl and Rosalind have done. And that to me is, respecting the sweat equity. I think all of those points are are really important and just speak to the value of the simplest acts of just occupying space together on equal terms, which I think generally only public space really provides, and what that can sort of by osmosis teach us. So I think the separation, the ways in which we built community over the last, again, 6-7 decades is to separate. And what public space, civic commons, assets like the one you're building can do is, again, bring us back together. And each of you on the panel spoke to it. And I love the simplicity of, you know, if I can take my kids there, it feels safe to me. I love the combination that County Exec Crowley made of connections to equity, the fact that each of you emphasized collaboration and partnerships. I mean, all of those things are so important, and just, you know, using all of the tools. Mayor Barrett, you said that, you know, really not treating this simply as, and I think this is the other mistake we often make, right? Everything's a transaction. So if we build this, it doesn't relate to that, or it doesn't leverage that. So really kind of taking that next step to make a trail leverage housing, or, you know, to get the more out of it, right, is where I think the real power in these assets come. And so on the riverfront, we've tried to do that, and adding even a layer of welcome and management on top of what we build has been very important to, I think, making the work sing.
No, I don't think that's the simple. I think what we've learned over this course of the last year is that simple is grand. Simple is fantastic, and probably it's huge. So I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. Back to Secretary Thompson. So in the past, highways, railroads, and other infrastructure have physically divided neighborhoods. We know it's past that, but definitely physically, including in historically Black neighborhoods. Take I-43, for example, through Bronzeville here in Milwaukee. So just wanted to know from you, what have we learned from the past, and how do these lessons inform your work today?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Rosalind. You know, if you look back in the 1950s and 60s, when the United States built the interstate system, one of the things it did do, which is talked about a lot, is it really, from a commerce standpoint, brought together the country and probably made it, you know, the economic powerhouse that it was in the world. But in so doing, anytime you're going to cite something like that, it's going to be difficult. And I think what happened at the time was communities that had the least amount of representation and political clout simply had these interstates and these throughways just put through their neighborhoods without a lot of consultation or input. And we've had 50 years now to see that in the role that I'm in now, I definitely get to hear about it, and I hear about the pain and the repercussions of what dividing a lot of these neighborhoods did. I think Darryl was talking before about how, you know, in a given neighborhood, you were able to just go down to the drugstore or the grocery store, and, you know, some of the impacts of dividing neighborhoods took that away. And so what did we learn from it? I think, you know, our department and other departments in the country now, you know, when you're going through an environmental impact statement, environmental process, when you're going to be doing a project like this, there's got to be a lot more emphasis put into public involvement. That can't be checking a box. That we have to not only hold public listening sessions, but we have to listen. And that doesn't mean that everybody's always going to be happy 100% of the time, but it does mean that we have to listen and weigh costs and benefits, and actually look at the communities that are being affected. And it can't always be the communities that it always seems to be the same communities that don't have their voices heard. And so We're not building a lot of new interstates anymore, but when we do have instances now where we need ones that need to be redone, and that conjures up, a lot of those feelings and things that had happened in the past, and I'm cognizant of that, and so we have to realize that, and I think do the other things that whether it's transit or whether it's trails like this or the other things that can connect communities and help heal some of the things that were a result of that.
Thank you for an honest answer. Appreciate that. We're going to keep going in order, and up next is Mayor Tom Barrett. So the pandemic has emphasized the importance of green spaces. I think the safest place you could be now is outside, right? Now, I don't know about the weather, but in Milwaukee, but their outside is safe, so for parks and for trails. So how can the city ensure that these spaces are available for all residents in their neighborhood?
Well, everything we do in the city is geared towards equity, and that means putting the resources in those parts of the city that need it. And when you talk about green spaces, without a doubt, equity means having places where people can use. And we're thankful that the county has such a robust park system. And I know the county executive is committed to making sure that the resources go to individuals who live near those county parks as well. Because it's about having a place where you can go to play. And that's what this is all about, or to take a nice walk with your spouse or your significant other, to ride a bike, to take a hike. All of that is so real and so visceral that you have to make those investments. And I think having the resources to do a more robust linear park here, and the fact that Walter Hood is involved, I think lends a lot more credibility to funders, quite honestly. You see that you've got this MacArthur genius who's been working with us on this trail. And I think the work that Carol does, the work that the foundations do, the work that GMC does, that we'll see more of an opportunity to invest more in this park because it's such a valuable tool. But again, I think that we have to show that people are using it. And when people are using it, I think that begets even more enthusiasm. And so we all have our challenges and we all have work to do here. So you can go there right now. And I know one of the questions is, when is it open? It's open right now. You can walk down the trail now. But it's not something that is completed overnight. We all know that we've been working on this for a number of years. And we've made significant progress, but we can make a lot more progress. And I think that that's what's most important today. So we talk about the victories we've had so far, but also that there's a higher calling that we have, and there's more work that needs to be done. So for me, having these spaces, these green spaces in neighborhoods where there are lower incomes is incredibly important, because I know that the residents who live in some of these neighborhoods have the least ability to go somewhere else for fun. So we have to make it attractive to the people who live here, and that's what we're committed to.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that. The Beerline Trail is open and paved. Thank you, Department of Transportation. So go ahead and walk it. Mayor Barrett's answer led us right into the next question for County Executive Crowley, which is Milwaukee County has an amazing park system. We know that. So just wanted you to talk about your administration's plan to keep that vibrant asset as a part of our communities.
Great question. I think this is a conversation not only I and my administration, but previous administrations have continuously asking themselves. But I'm glad with this very first budget that we were able to avoid major cuts to popular services like our county parks or needed services like our transit system in this past budget. But I'm going to be clear that this was largely due to the CARES funding that we have received and us being creative. And so when you think about this pandemic, like many financial challenges that individuals and other governments are having, it comes really down to our ability to generate revenue and invest these dollars right back into the communities and the services that people need and desire the most. And so, I would like to say that many people on this call, the county board, the business community, other government partners have been extremely instrumental in the Move for Milwaukee Coalition, which is pursuing a binding referendum for a 1% local option sales tax which comes with property tax relief. And I know a lot of people hear me talking about this, but there is a huge need to provide property tax relief to Milwaukee County taxpayers. Our budget is heavily relied on property taxes. But when you think about our sales taxes, we have one of the lowest in the country. And so I think right now is the time to really rebalance the way that we fund our local governments. And this is going to be critical for Milwaukee County, but not just for us. I think for all municipalities, including the city, when you think about how much we send and share in taxes to the state of Wisconsin, and seeing the decline in revenue, or it's relatively stayed flat as far as what we receive back in shared revenue. And so if we are authorized to do this, this will help us generate about $160 million annually, capturing revenue from folks who actually don't live here in Milwaukee County, but who wants to come here and enjoy our parks, enjoy our arenas, enjoy our summers when we are back and we can do that safely. But our parks are still doing the work to generate their own revenue as well. And so we have created public-private partnerships through our Love Your Parks campaign. And so we've partnered up with businesses like Purple Door Ice Cream, Stone Creek Coffee, Sprecher Brewery, as well as Beer Capital, to be as creative as possible to make sure that we're increasing the revenues to reinvest back into our park system.
Perfect, that's awesome. Thank you so much for the information. And go to Darryl. So the economic impact of the Beerline was significant in our city's past. What is the economic opportunity for continued development on the trail now?
Yeah, one of the things about the Riverworks City Center, or this district, business district, it was heavily reliant on the railway by servicing a lot of these different companies. That's why you see so many spurs going directly to these buildings. American Motor produced many of the well-known cars in this area. If you remember the Pacer, which everybody was driving. You also had the Jeep. So this area was known for heavy industry. And over the years, when those companies left or closed down, we had a lot of vacant buildings that had those spur lines going to those buildings. But over time, when those businesses left, the businesses that came in behind them was light industry. And so they didn't need so much of the rail line. So for us, this was an opportunity to really look at that rail line and see what could be done. Riverworks Development Corporation made a number of investments. We took an old pasta factory, which actually had that rail line going to it, and we turned it into 36 units of affordable housing. We're also working on the connected building, which is located right there on Keith and Richards. We're bringing in a small entrepreneur. We also looking at other developments along the trail to really spur. So this is an opportunity to reconnect with a lot of those property owners and look at ways to repurpose a lot of these buildings, if it's related for like industrial use, for housing. So there's a lot of opportunities to really reinvest within this community, within the River West neighborhood, but within the Harambe neighborhood, there's a lot more opportunity to create jobs for neighborhood residents, to bring back the small businesses that could be in larger buildings, making use of the space. So for me, it's unlimited what we could do with the trail. And we also get back to this whole level of equity within our community. How do we help those businesses of color prosper and bring opportunity for reinvestment back into this community? So I'm very hyped about the opportunities ahead of us as we look to redevelop the trail in the surrounding neighborhood.
That's great. I'm so happy you used the word hype. I'm glad you're hyped. Hype and hip. Thank you, Darryl. Carol, so you have a lot of experience in all of this, and so you're listening to our local and regional leaders, community leaders, talk about what they're doing and what's happening and the plans for the future. Are there words of advice or best practices that you would share with us?
I think you're already there. I mean, first of all, best practices are only best practices at the time, and the world moves on. And so then the question is, what is the best practice today that hasn't yet been written up or discovered or case studied? So, but I think you've got the fundamentals right. You're talking about equity. You're putting, every single person on this panel has put equity at the forefront. Great. You're talking to community, you're working in collaboration and in partnership. You're looking at not only how does the trail connect people in neighborhoods, but you're looking at how you connect the trail work to other community work, right? To fill out the community and to provide those needs. It feels to me like you've got the essentials right. I would just encourage you as you go forward. I mean, it looks like, by the way, your programming is terrific too, as well as your messaging. So well done. I think the things I would at least be, you got to be able to afford it. But I do believe if you can staff it even episodically in a way that you've got someone there whose mindset is welcome and particularly welcome, keeping the knuckleheads under control when you have to do that, but making people feel safe and welcome, right? That I think is something we tend to overlook. We staff for cleanup. We staff for, we're going to put the guys in uniforms for safety. We staff for programming. I think it's hard, though, to staff sometimes for that everyday, just making sure people feel welcome and feel like the place has eyes on it. That to me that has given us a level of performance that we thought we would get the extra value out of that, but I think we've gotten far more value out of it than I expected. And then don't skip on design. And sometimes, I mean, it looks like you've done a great job. Walter's fantastic and his team, but I think toggling some of the toggle between what people are, what they know and what they're comfortable with, sometimes, creates expectations maybe that are a little lower than, and so the key with the designer is, can that designer sort of take what people say they want and then lift that, to another level. And I find that it sometimes creates, it's informed tension, I would call it. And, how do you really make sure, again, I think the secretary said it well, you felt like it came from a very real place. It came from, he didn't use grassroots, and now I'd have to look back at my notes to see what he said, because I loved the phrase. It was just, respecting the sweat equity. That's great, respecting the sweat equity. And how do you marry that with great design like a Walter Hood and his team can bring?
That's perfect. I don't think we ever thought about just having that welcoming component. Everything else you said, we need that, but that's interesting.
If you want to explore it further, we've got, people on our field ops team who have become very good at that and have helped us kind of invent the position. And again, I think it's paid off it's not to say that that's all they do. I mean, they also pick up trash. They also, they do the basics, but they really do, but they come with a mindset of, I'm going to make everybody in here feel really good about being here.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. That's amazing. And I agree about design. We want this to be first class for sure. So we are on our third round of questions. I'll ask a few. Do want to leave time for question and answers from the audience. And I do just want to say thank you to all the panelists. I love that we're having these conversations about equity and about Black folks, and really, correcting what's been done and doing it differently as we move forward. And we weren't having these conversations in the past, right? We weren't having these conversations. They were in silos maybe in certain groups, but to have this be something that we just always talk about and is ingrained, and we are and being intentional on, is very important. It's very key to actually making change that benefits folks across the spectrum. So just thank you, Secretary Thompson, Darryl. You just, what you've done in the community and how you've let me be involved is very appreciated. Mayor Barrett, County Executive Crowley, and then Carol, the work that you've been doing and are just willing to give and that information is fantastic. So appreciate it. We're going to just go to a few more questions, and then we'll get to our Q&A so people have time to really dialogue with the panelists. So Secretary Thompson, is just how can we be intentional about equity when it comes to transportation and other infrastructure?
Well, you know, I think the way that you're intentional about something is by being intentional about it. And I don't mean that to be redundant, but you know, I think it's something that we've talked about from the beginning here. When I started a little over 2 years ago, we went through a pretty significant reorganization of our department here, and then we convened with our senior leadership team, and I know County Executive Crowley, with what he has done there, talked about their mission and vision. And we looked at what we had, and we came up with a new vision for the Department of Transportation, and we call it the WISDOT IDEA, and it stands for Integrity, Diversity, Excellence, and Accountability. And we try to make sure that we've actually implemented in each of our divisions that when we're hiring, when we're doing projects, we're doing everything. Everything's got to be looked through the lens of those 5 areas that we do that in. And I think, you know, when it comes to transportation and equity, there's so many components. And to me, the biggest one, and my intention isn't to be political about this, but the biggest one really is when we talk about transit. You know, we have formed the other thing that we did to try to be intentional about this is I've formed it's called a non-driver advisory committee. And we've brought in 4 other state departments into this. We've got co-chairs that are not from the department, but rather from some advocacy groups for people with disabilities and from others. And, you know, to look at the 1.2 million non-drivers that are in Wisconsin. And one of the things that we did at one of the meetings was to have some of them run us through actual scenarios of from the point of a non-driver, what kind of planning has to go into going to a doctor's visit? And if something happens, then what's your plan B, and how do you do that? And to be honest with you, the greater Milwaukee area, it's more difficult than most metropolitan areas, and not because of, I mean, the bus rapid transit that the county executive is moving forward on, I think is going to be tremendously helpful. The mayor obviously has worked with the HOP to try to do some of those things, but the greater Milwaukee area is literally, and then maybe Carol, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but from all of my research and that I know, it's literally the only major metropolitan area like this in the country that does not allow the locals to get together and raise revenue for transit if they so choose. We had legislation on the books here back in the Doyle administration that allowed for regional transit authorities in certain areas of the state, including Milwaukee, if groups wanted to get together, and a lot of times there was referendums and you voted on it, that you could choose to do that through sales tax or what it may be. And right now we've got a lot of folks at the state level saying that they don't believe it's right that we put transportation dollars statewide into transit. But then they also say we don't agree with giving locals the ability to raise the money themselves to put into transit. And so, you know, I think there's a serious disconnect there. And there's a lot of different areas that transportation being intentional has to do with equity, but I would really start there. That's changing that is to me one of the most you know, significant things that we could do when it comes to equity and transportation.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Okay. Saw some head nods from the county exec and the mayor on that. So thank you very much. So we're gonna just wanna stop quickly with the panel and get to some of we have 2 questions from our audience. I think Darryl, these are probably more for you, but anyone on the panel feel free to answer if you have it. So the first question from Susan is, what is the timeline? Can you talk more about the cultural and artistic assets being planned?
As Darryl answers that, maybe he can share with us the history behind that cool little geyser behind him there. Am I the only one noticing that thing? So, what is that thing, Darryl?
I was thinking the same, Mayor.
I'm sending up smoke signals to everybody. So what it is, it's a mist. My wife gave it to help me relax, so I'm in the office.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. Sorry about that. I had to ask. I
love it.
Well, thank you. I guess one of the biggest pieces, we're getting ready to move into a capital campaign because we have the plan itself. And so because of COVID-19, it was pushed back at least almost a year, but we'll be kicking it off. And we need to raise a significant amount of money. We're talking anywhere between $3 to $5 million as far as investments. Then from there, we'll look at rolling out certain areas we want to do first. One of the areas we want to look at is Richard in Keith Avenue and Richards. The next one is the Vienna opening, then also Capitol Drive. So we're going to do it in phases. So I'm looking that we can probably do some of the construction probably in 2022, but we also want to look how we're connecting the trail through Glendale to the broader network and take it all the way to the corridor trail. So there's a number of things that we'll be rolling out and keeping people updated as we move forward.
Thank you. And then can someone explain what the future connections to the Beerline area are, Beerline are, and will it be open? So you did address this with the going into Glendale, the underpass, or the Secretary Thompson. But if you can talk about a timeline about when that will happen, maybe.
I'll leave that to Secretary Townsend, maybe talk about the construction of the underpass and also the construction work for the highway.
So this is of the Glendale underpass, is that the question?
Yes, the future connections, the Beerline.
Sure. You know, I'm going to actually, if it's okay, I don't want to be wrong here. I don't have that right at my fingertips here, but I can get back to Julia and yourself if we could share it with the group about timelines, because I don't have that timeline in front of me.
Perfect. Yes, makes sense. Thank you.
And just when we talk about future connections, I mean, Milwaukee County, we want to make sure that we can connect all of our trails. But this kind of goes back to what I was kind of talking about before, is that it really relates to how we're generating revenue to make these types of investments. And if we're not, for example, pushing forward for this local option 1% sales tax, it makes it difficult for us to make these proper investments, to making sure that we're connecting communities, but more importantly, making sure we invest in equity. And we're doing that with our strategic plan. So these are things that we want to do, but we need to make sure that we get the community involved and understand how they can assist us and going after more resources to do these types of things.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a few minutes, and we have more questions, but I would just love for any last thoughts from people hearing other panelists speak that they want to say, I really want to get this out. Got about a minute if you want to respond or give last thoughts to anything. I'll start with Secretary Thompson.
Well, number one, again, I just want to thank you for being a part of this. It's really a tremendous project. And, when County Executive Crowley talked about connecting some of the trails in the region together, one of the things I'm really proud about is we've been able now to connect trails statewide to the point where this last year we were able to announce we've got the first U.S. designated bike trail across Wisconsin. So you can get on at Lake Michigan down by Milwaukee, and you can travel all the way to the Mississippi now, because we've made those connections. So we're really, really proud of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Barrett?
Well, again, you can see from the conversation today that we all believe in the power of partnership. And I think that that's going to be the key for our success, is not only partnering in different units of government, but also having the community involved. And I think you can see, again, that there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of history here. So we just have to keep the positive momentum going. That's what I'm focusing on, is keeping the positive momentum going.
Thank you. County Executive?
Just echo the same comments as the Secretary and Mayor. We want to make sure that we're being intentional with these connections, being intentional, including people, bridging the gap, and really investing in equity. That's the strategic focus areas of Milwaukee County, and we want to make sure that we show that and show what that looks like, particularly with this Beerline Trail. And I'm glad to have Carol on, as well as Darryl, yourself, and Julia on, not only just on this particular webcast, but just in general as partners that we continue to move forward about how we continue to invest in equity in the future as well.
Thank you. Darryl?
Yeah, I think everything that's been said, once again, it's just an honor for me to have the privilege to work with the mayor, the county exec, and the Secretary Thompson on many levels of government, really bringing them down to the neighborhood level and talking about the issues within the neighborhoods. So for me, it's a blessing, but it's also an opportunity for the residents' voices to be heard at the community level. So I'm just excited once again about this project moving forward and looking forward to the opportunities, not only about the trail itself, but the community that we work within, which is the Harambe community.
Thank you. And our keynote, Ms. Carol. Any last words?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for making me part of the panel. I've learned a lot, and it's great to hear concepts reinforced. I'm really glad that we got to the question, one of the structural questions is how do you afford to do these kinds of things, and how do you pay for equity? And that's not only reallocating, but how do you do new allocations? So I really appreciate that. I would just say, the Secretary talked about the trail, the designated trail that goes from Michigan, Lake Michigan to the Mississippi. I would just invite you to, once you get to the Mississippi, just turn south and all the way to Memphis, and you'll, be on our riverfront. So see, we're connected. And the other thing, I guess, is just if the Bucks and the Grizzlies meet again this season, if somebody could just slip a note and say, take it easy on us, I would really appreciate it.
That's perfect way to end. We want to thank
Rosalind?
Yes.
I really apologize. I hate to do this, but our Southeast director is on here, and so he was so timely enough to give me the information, so I don't have to get back to you. So we're going to be having a February letting for that. It's going to be multi-year construction, and I understand that the city and county will probably be applying for a CMAQ grant for some of the connections. But so there will be a letting beginning in February.
That's perfect. Thank you so much thank you. Look, this is the beauty of technology, right? You chat it right here and get the answers. We appreciate that. So thank you. This was fantastic. Just the honesty, the transparency, the work that people are putting in and trying to make things better and sustainable and more community focused is fantastic. This is a 3-part series, so you will look out for the next one in February. Check your inboxes, your emails, your 2-ways. If you still have a 2-way, you give me a beeper, but no, another conversation. Thank you all once again to all the panelists, the audience, everyone that's involved in the Beerline Trail Leadership Committee. Really appreciate you all dedication to this work. And until next time, you all stay safe and have a wonderful day. Thank you.